Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mall Talkers. I'm Michael Paskett, aka The Mall Guy, and this is a show where retail and mall pros come to talk shop. In 30 minutes or less, I'm bringing you conversations from the strategists, the operators, and innovators driving the evolution of malls today. You'll leave with tactics, stories, and trends shaping what malls were, where malls have been, and what they're becoming. So pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and let's chat some malls. Today, we've got some security experts in the rooms as guests. We've got Brian McIlravey, head of security sector at Mappedin, and Barry Bassnett, expert with Martyn's Law. And today, a topic at the tip of everyone's tongues in the UK, Martyn's Law is here, and are the UK malls ready? Everyone, welcome. How you doing?
Hi. Great to be here, Pask.
Pask, I haven't been called that in a long time. Well, I'm excited to chat today about Martyn's Law. To set the stage, can you guys tell me a little bit about yourself, who you've been, who you are, and where you've been, or where you're heading?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm Brian McIlravey. I run the public safety and enterprise security department here at Mappedin. But prior to that, I originally started as a first responder way back in time for many years. I then became a security tech nerd and started my own company. I've been in the incident management, incident reporting, access control, every security technology that you can imagine. I've worked in it the last 20, 25 years. So I love security. I love the technology that drives it. And I love topics like this. I could talk all day.
Okay, good. Yeah. My name's Barry Bassnett. I've been a cartographer since, I think, the Jurassic period, over 40 years. I specialize in indoor mapping and digital twins. And one of the things we're getting asked a lot is how can we use mapping to do audits of our assets, keep people safe. And that's really what I've been working on the last year. And as the UK embraces Martyn's Law, it's becoming a really interesting subject, not just about keeping people safe, but the whole how you manage malls, how you manage complex buildings. Lessons I think we're going to be passing on to other areas as well. And hopefully by answering some of the questions, see there is a crossover between what's happening in the UK in security and the response to events and what can be applied to any shopping mall in the world, really, I think. But my area of specialism really at the moment is helping people navigate Martyn's Law and the compliance and just trying to make sense or make it as easy as possible.
Oh, without question.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you, what is Martyn's Law?
Okay, so Martyn's Law came out of a bombing in Manchester, an Ariana Grande concert. As a result of that, the inquiries found that there was a lot of failures in systems, everything from how were the first responders arrived, how the stewards evacuated. There was just a list. And Martyn's Law was campaigned by Martyn's named after one of the unfortunate victims, and his mum's campaign to make this law. It became law last April. It was in the Centre of Parliament, but basically it gave UK market or people 24 months to get their act together. We're way halfway through that, and it becomes law and compliance on, I think it's the 3rd of April next year. The problem we've got is so few people actually know about it. It's not been publicized very much, but it's becoming a massive headache for anybody who has a complex structure. It applies to not just shopping malls, it applies to universities, hospitals, entertainment centers, sports stadium, all sorts of things. And what it really means is you've got to get a layer of information to deal with security and response to terrorist attacks. It's not overly complicated, especially if you've got some sort of mapping platform to do it, obviously. But a lot of people are worried about how they do it. And what I do is help people get through that first phase. But it's become so there are over 10,000 buildings that fall into two tiers. So there's a tier that goes from 200 to 799 people, which is the standard tier. And that could be anything from a small cinema to a village hall to anything. After that, there's an enhanced tier, and the enhanced tier goes from 800 public attendees and above. And it applies to all sorts of things. So it's a cinema complex or an outdoor event. What it basically means in the legislation is not, it sounds like it's a grudge purchase, but it really isn't. It helps people figure out what they do in response to and prepare and train their staff and help the emergency responders and also show and demonstrate that they're actually doing something. But it's causing a lot of headaches because people are scratching their head because they're used to doing fire escapes, let's evacuate the building. But this has 4 pillars, really. It has evacuation, it has evacuation, where you want to lock yourself in, lockdown, and then there's a whole series of things to do with communication, how you communicate to the public, how you communicate with your staff, your volunteers, whatever it may be, how do you communicate with the first responders so they know quickly, basically, how to understand their building. So helping people to do that, whether that's the employees, whether that's the first responders, whether it's the public. And essentially what we're doing is indoor mapping to help them do that.
Fascinating. I'm obviously biased, but I would agree. I'll ask Brian, or BMAC. So we call Brian BMAC over here, so I'll be referring to him as BMAC. What does this mean to you? Obviously leading the security space at Mappedin, but more specifically, I feel like you have a good depth and breadth, having been a first responder, having actually very likely been in situations like this.
Yeah, it changes the game from should do this to you must do this. So historically in time, there's things called pre-incident plans where some places, some companies would do a pre-incident plan. So that's just basically, we're going to plan for an incident to happen. And like Barry said, here's the exits, here's the systems, here's the layout of the building. Something like Martyn's Law and other laws change that from, hey, you should do this to you absolutely must do this now. You are legally bound to do it. And if you don't, you are responsible. And in the case of Martyn's Law, correct me if I'm wrong here, Barry, but they have to designate a responsible person. And if you don't do it right, or you're found negligent, I think you actually go to jail, I believe, right, Larry?
Potentially, yes, you do. It's a criminal. It becomes a criminal act. Yes. So someone that has to take responsibility for sure.
Yeah, and that's a big one, Pask. Like when you are designated. So in Martyn's Law, each facility or venue has to say, Barry, you are the designated person. You are responsible for making the pre-incident plan and doing it. And if not, that designated person, if they are found negligent, that person and the company are found to be negligent. I mean, that's pressure because it's now a must. You must do it. We don't have that over here in North America yet, but it's going to happen.
That's powerful. And within this being powerful, it's obviously going to be a thing, could leak to other places. What should people be doing right now? Like, what should people be doing first? How do they become compliant?
I think the major thing that they need to do is actually understand their building and it becomes a lot more not wholly detailed. This isn't scary stuff, but you've got to think about things in a different way than you have in the past. I talked about fire evacuation. That's really straight. Everybody gets out. But you've now got to think about like in a shopping mall. So there are 4 or 5 things I think are really crucial. The first one thing is someone is responsible, as Brian said, but then it's all the retailers and the lessees have to buy into the same program. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if they say, right, there's an announcement because there's an incident, we shut all the shutters of all the shops. There has to be some sort of plan as where are these shutters? How can people evacuate and these sort of things? And it's like a big project team. You've got to manage lots of little parts of it, but there has to be one overall plan. The second thing I think is really it comes down to understanding how things will change at different times. Because you may well, as a shopping mall with an entertainment complex, it will have the mall might be empty at one time, but the cinema complex is full. So it's understanding your building. But the only way you can do that is actually by mapping it. And when I say mapping it, it doesn't have to be like, it's not really detailed, but you need to know specific things like which doors can be shut, which doors have to stay open. My favorite one is though, not favorite, but one of the big things is what happens in the back of house. Because normally lots of these, the shopping malls and things, they manage the front of house, but the back of house becomes really, really important in the events of it. For two reasons. One, it can be an evacuation route through, normally where it says employees only or something, through those doors out to the loading bay and things like that. But it's also a way that the first responders can get in as well. So there's things like that. So mapping the back office becomes as important. But the other thing about it is it's almost like you have to have two maps. So you have a public facing one, you know, if you're doing wayfinding and all that lovely stuff that's like mapped indoors or whatever. But then you have to have an internal facing one that only the people inside can see, because you don't necessarily want to put the public one with all the CCTV and all those things attached to it, because it gives a ne'er-do-well an open plan as to what to do. But this is about having a base map and different layers to suit different things. But I think the other point as well that Brian pointed out is what it says is the legislation says that they don't want big consultancy coming in and just signing off and saying they're compliant. That's not how it's going to work. It means that people have to take responsibility and understand their building and understand it as it changes too, because they have to keep these plans updated. So that's where sort of a content management system for mapping comes in handy, because people can update it themselves. They don't have to get a surveyor in. So it's about understanding your building, and the best way of doing that is mapping to show where the CCTV is, or the gates, or the bolts, and saying this door opens this way and there's an inside lock, or all the things you have to consider in now when you're talking about responses to different terrorist activities. I think it shouldn't be too difficult to do, but people do get a bit, well, where do I start? You start by mapping what you've got.
Insert Mappedin plug.
Well, it could be them, but it could be anything else.
No, yeah. I get it. And I feel like hearing this, like there's a lot of synergies that I've heard BMAC talk a lot about. BMAC, can you go into like how you can also leverage what you're already doing in the security space to start to work towards Martyn law, whether it's mapping or just within normal security systems?
Yeah. Any mall, any venue has security right now. I think one of the biggest things or challenges that I'd say is malls are community hubs now. Yep. People are, they're socializing, they are working out. They're like I think Barry said, like one has a circus or something in it. I mean, malls are places where people hang out, lots of people, and crowds create security challenges. In a mall, you're going to have current security. So everybody knows there's security guards. We see them walking around. Everybody knows there are cameras. They're all over the place watching everything. So how do you take what you have? So Barry mentioned one thing. When you're doing a pre-incident plan for your venue, if it's a mall, you're going to say, okay, let's understand what is the mall, how does it operate. So a map is really, really super important. Annotating the map, where are all the cameras, where are all the exits, all the life safety systems. That's all very, very super important stuff to have. But when you get into mall security, there's a concept called negligent security. Negligent security simply, it's a subset of a premise liability. That's really super important to any venue. But negligent security simply revolves around understanding all the potential risks or incidents that could happen at your venue. So you'd have to say, okay, at this mall, what are the types of incidents that could happen? So you have to look at historical incidents, within the past 5 years, 3 years, 3 days, 3 hours. If a mall is ever deemed, or a venue is ever deemed to say, hey, look, you could have and you should have been able to prevent this, you're liable. And there's all kinds of things that go into that. But one of the largest things that can happen to a property owner is they get what's called the nuclear verdict. So the nuclear verdict would be that one thing that happened at your venue that you become liable, and it costs you millions. So I know there was a mall, I think at West last year, a couple of years ago. $22 million judgment against them because the security officer overreacted in a parking lot, causing the death of a person. One event cost them $22 million. So in planning for an event, I mean, it's super important to understand what are the types of events that can happen. Are we prepared for them? Do we know what's going to happen when we do it? So that's where things like pre-plans come into play. Understanding what types of incidents could potentially happen. So you're looking at the frequency of an event that might happen at a mall, and that's going to change mall to mall. If you're at a mall in, a very, very quiet suburban neighborhood, you're not going to have the same frequency and types of incidents. Or if you're a mall in the middle of a city in a high crime area, you're going to have a high volume of malls at a different level that you have to plan and respond to. So when you get to something like Martyn's Law, if you're looking at from a mall point of view, you're going to have security systems, but now you have to take a much higher step and say, okay, in planning for this, what do I currently have in place? I now have to take this really super seriously, which they do. I think malls take their security very, very super serious anyways, simply because they have the challenge of open traffic, hundreds of thousands of people just walking through at any point they want. So I think Martyn's Law, malls are going to be the ones that are going to certainly be, hey, we know how to do this. We've done this before. But when you're looking at security infrastructure, they'll start changing from what's called passive security infrastructure to active security infrastructure, which is a big thing.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So I will ask as well, I can see malls thinking this might not apply to them or might not apply as seriously to them. My argument is obviously malls are shifting towards the third space, shifting towards experiential, shifting towards events. I'm assuming this applies to them. Is that correct, Barry? Or is this all venues?
As I understand it, it's the mall completely, but then you could have one department store on a Christmas Eve that's got 800 people in it. So you have to mitigate, or you have to work to the worst case scenario. Are you likely to have 800 people? But there is an interesting split depending on the retailer. So if they could have a maximum of 200 people in, they might feel they would fall into the 200 people thing, which is as a less stringent. It's more of a paper exercise for the people in the standard tier. However, because they're part of a collective, there seems to be a perceived shared responsibility. The main responsibility for everyone falls on the mall owner or designated owner or that designated person. But what they have to do is get everybody together. There's no point them having an emergency plan that says shut down and then the shops say, no, push everybody out. It has to be all agreed. And that is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges. But I think that the hardest challenge for me is where I find the use of a map is really good, is because it allows people to do walkthrough exercises, tabletop stuff. You could say to every lessee, every shop in a mall, and say, watch this video. This is what you've got to do, and tick that box. And then everybody's playing on the same hymn sheet. But it is going to be shopping malls, definitely. And a lot of shopping malls have bus stations or rail stations or cinema complexes. Sometimes they're owned by different people, but essentially the shopping mall owner, the people who have the overall thing and rent out the spaces, they're the people who are going to be responsible. But they have to do it in combination with the lessees, the franchises, the concessions and stuff like that. So and to do that, having a master map for me is the only way you can do it. But the great thing about it in the UK is it's quite interesting because people are seeing it more of a grudge purchase. I don't see it like that because it gives you a base layer that you can put all sorts of things on. For example, wayfinding. Wayfinding obviously is a superb thing, but wayfinding an event is really, really important because what you want to do, you want to say, this is the way away from the incident. Don't push people to it. So there's an awful lot of connectivity, which is a long answer to a very short question. But yeah, everybody. It applies to shopping malls, it applies to universities, hospitals, further education, all sports or sports stadia, you just name it. Out in Glastonbury, it applies to that. But yeah, so I'd say it applies to every shopping mall. What they do with it, they have to show that they have paid due attention to it, and they've given it consideration. The legislation doesn't say you've got to invest in millions of pounds of anti-vehicle protection or things like that. It says you've got to train your staff to be able to respond and do what is economically sensible to do. It's not saying you've got to spend millions on a whole new CCTV system. So it might help you to find the blind spots.
Interesting. So it's not like a checklist 1, 2, 3, 4 compliance. It's meant to be more vague to pick up the intricacies of individual venues.
I think that's probably true. I think the problem is that there is such a mixture. You can imagine a shopping mall with a railways on top of a railway station, like the Bullring in Birmingham.
I was just going to suggest that.
And well, who's responsible for the checklist?
Yeah.
The SIA, the people who are administering it, they have the ability to come in and inspect on site and ask you for things. And if you can't show it, then they can shut your venue down. That's one of the other problems with it, is they can shut, and they will fine you X thousands of pounds a day until you are compliant.
Fascinating. So you mentioned blind spots, BMAC. Where do you see some blind spots in the security space within venues right now? Because I feel like whatever this blind spot is could help within Martyn's Law.
Yeah, to me, it still remains negligent security, right? Yeah. So duty of care is a huge thing. And malls have probably one of the largest duties of care, again, because they have people coming and going, different times of day, different areas. You have, your duty of care changes. It doesn't change, but it's harder to protect the parking garage because parking garages have their own challenges to a smash and grab. So the biggest blind spot is, are we doing enough to protect anything that could happen? Anything could happen at a mall, but there are, certain things that happen in a mall with frequency that you could say, hey, like smash and grabs, really frequent. Parking lot incidents, really, really frequent. So you have to be prepared for any one of those. I mentioned earlier, passive security programs, or what we call passive security infrastructure over active security infrastructure. With AI right now, you can change passive, and passive is just every mall has cameras, like I mentioned, right? So you have all these cameras all over the place, and cameras in a mall are really just meant to record. They are not meant to detect. If an incident happens, they are meant to record information. Let that, you have a smash and grab. You very, very rarely see the guards going to interact. What they do is they stand there, they watch, they look. The cameras record all the information. The incident happens. They take all that. You hand it over to the police, and they investigate. AI-based cameras now, or AI technology that you can put in cameras and all kinds of things, do way different kinds of detection, active detection that passive cameras don't do. And active detection also changes from passive monitoring, where you have a guard that's trying to I think the average mall has 400 cameras. Some have 1,200. Some usually have around an average of 400. And there's lots of studies about the human interaction with cameras, and staring at like 400 cameras. The human mind actually can't comprehend everything that's going on, and they miss little details. AI-based cameras will actually not miss that. You can have things like weapon detection and shapes, crowd gathering, heat mapping within cameras. So I think the change from passive to active is a big thing. That also improves your duty of care level, because when something happens, if you say, hey, look, we had active AI cameras trying to track this, and we did do it, we caught it 9 out of 10 times, we were able to detect it, but this one time something fell through the crack, you're probably going to be less negligent. You're probably still negligent because one incident happened, but you'll be less negligent because you did prove that you had active security. So that to me is the biggest blind spot, is just that one thing that could happen, and what steps are you taking to prepare for it?
Very cool.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. It's the stuff that people don't see behind malls. You don't go through a mall and think, hey, the camera's watching you, but you don't think this camera is counting the number of people in an area to say, hey, send an alert, because we just went from 18 people in an area to 185 people in an area. why did we do that? Might be nothing. Maybe a clown came in and people are coming to see the clown, or maybe it's a group of people coming to have a fight. Two gangs have got together and say, hey, we're going to meet in the food court and have a fight. But what the AI cameras will do is say, I think we have an anomaly here. We should look into it like right now. Instead of passive security would be like, hey, there's an enormous fight going on in the food court. We should call the police, and that becomes reactive instead of proactive.
I think it's really interesting as what you're saying there, because you're talking about normal security. Martyn's Law was developed as a response to terrorist activity, but people don't know, is that person a terrorist or they're just a criminal? They can't tell. So a lot of the things that are happening with Martyn's Law, for me, impacts on what you're talking about, the duty of care anyway, until you've done and recorded or hopefully prevented or responded anyway and made people safe. You don't know what that perpetrator is. Is it a criminal act? Is it a terrorism act? Does it matter if people are going to get hurt? No, it doesn't. It's just about keeping people as safe and people to feel confident to come out and use these shopping malls and things.
Yeah, that's right. I think with relative to Martyn's Law, when you are trying to protect your mall, you're going to do a risk assessment and do your pre-plans. Your risk assessment is going to say, okay, we expect that we're going to have 14 fights a year at different locations. We're going to have parking lot thefts, and we're going to plan and say, we have to plan that if an active shooter came into this mall, that would be either a foreign or domestic terror attack. We have to be prepared for that. So in the scale of all the things that you're going to prepare for, under Martyn's Law, if you have a terrorist attack, you would say, look, we did an incident pre-plan for these types of incidents that could have been a terrorist attack. Could be an explosion, could be a shooting, could be driving a vehicle through a crowd. The mall has to prepare for every one of those. Plus, they unfortunately have to prepare for the other hundreds of things that could potentially happen at a mall, because their duty of care goes from the slip and fall accidents to a terrorist attack across the whole thing. So it all applies. Just Martyn's Law now forces them. It becomes a must of, hey, you must prepare for this no matter what, which again, I think most malls already do, but now it's a legal standard. What it does is it forces everybody down the ladder to say, hey, if you are just a community center, you're going to have 400 people for a lunch, you have to have an incident pre-plan. A mall, in most cases, are going to have very good pre-plans, but malls also have scale, right? There are very, very small, I don't know if they're called independent malls. Then you have, really, really big operational type malls. And there's probably a scale of who takes some parts more seriously. Question for you, Pask or Barry. Everyone pictures a mall as an indoor mall, but there's outdoor malls now. In that case, I find it really interesting because now you just have a whole bunch of individual operators out there, and how Martyn's Law would apply to each one. Is each store individually responsible as the person that owns the entire parking lot that those malls sit on? So that's one where I was thinking, as we're chatting here, I'm like, I wonder how that would work, because it's not always an indoor mall.
No, I mean, my mum's favorite shopping mall is exactly that. It's a circular, lots of shops independently, lots of different things. In this case, I mean, I think the advice that people are given is that the owner has to coordinate something, because a shooter coming in there and strolling down the outside, they have to respond to that, and there is about evacuation or evacuation. So it's going to come down, I think it's going to come down to the mall owner who's going to be responsible for it, but there is a lot of gray area. I mean, I think that the best thing is advice is to think the worst and then work from that. So
yeah, I do think as well it's going to force a lot of collaboration, because yes, think of a horseshoe that's generally owned by one individual, but there are many situations where one side of the block is one company, one side of the block is another owner, shared ownership, joint ventures, et cetera, et cetera. So all of a sudden this becomes, yes, it's 2 or 3 owners, but in the eyes of me as a shopper, it is one venue. Right. And
you're right. And this is where things like lease management of shopping malls, it all fits together, because then you can demarcation. So one of the other interesting things about it is, if you're looking like, say, it's the approaches to the venue that people are responsible for as well. So it may well be that there's a higher risk, and so there's crowds building up because there's a search thing going on, or a different, a football stadium might have a soccer match, okay, proper football, okay, but then there might be a massive rock concert, and so people are on the pitch. And that requires a different risk assessment, as you say, Brian, about how you deal with those things, queuing and searching. If very few, a lot will change on the risk assessment as well, because we have most European countries, I don't know about the US, but we have a security assessment, and currently we're at severe. There is likely to be a terrorist attack at some point, just because of what's going on in the global situation.
I was talking to a mall last week past that had a very, very large, it was actually a mall in Calgary that was holding an event for the Calgary Stampede. And what it was an outdoor breakfast. They serve pancakes every year, but they have a bouncy castle and they have music, but I think he said they had 20 or 25,000 people come through that. So you can imagine you're a mall that you're going to have now 25,000 people in your parking lot. As a security person, you're thinking, okay, I have a very, very unique problem here in that I have lots and lots of people, and anything could happen at any point in time. But that's a high risk event when you're a security person at a mall saying, hey, we're going to hold this great event. We're going to flip pancakes, and we're going to have 25,000 people in the parking lot. I remember, and I was talking to the security manager there. He's like, yeah, we had to bring in extra people, extra security devices. They brought in remote cameras, remote monitoring, and towers. I mean, that's a unique problem. You take that same thing and you put it in the UK, and now you have a very, very, very clear case for Martyn's Law that you're going to have that event. You have to have a pre-plan relative to that event of anything that could happen. And that probably happens all the time across all different malls everywhere. So there are unique challenges. And again, as people that go to malls, I would love to go to that pancake breakfast. And most people don't think, hey man, is this going to be safe? Is this really going to be safe? That mall where it was at, yeah, probably it's a very, very safe location. If that mall is somewhere else, there might be ones where I'd go, yeah, I'm not, you could never serve me a pancake in that mall parking lot, no matter what. And that's probably true everywhere.
I think it's mostly about, I think what Martyn's Law is making people focus on in the UK is about keeping people as safe as possible.
Yep.
And that's the main thing, whether that's to protect them or to minimize damage or do whatever they can to keep people safe, because the safer people are, the more they will use that facility. If you're nervous about turning up an event because there was a drive-by or that economically it makes sense, apart from the moral duty I think most people have. I don't think there's any mall in the world who would say they would they would compromise on their customers' safety at all.
Froze up. I think Pask. I think one of the things is Martyn's Law tells someone that we are prepared if an incident is going to happen. It doesn't stop the incident from happening. The awareness of any incident could happen then falls back to the mall team doing analysis, so pre-analysis of things that could be happening, monitoring social feeds. So nothing will ever truly prevent the incident from happening. But Martyn's Law in the UK for a mall will say, hey, if an incident does happen, a very serious incident, we have a plan on evacuation, shutdown, lockdown, whatever it might be relative to the incident. And that's kind of the difference. It just gives us people, hey, if something happens, we have a plan for them to react, which some do, some don't, but they have to.
Without question. And with that, I'll actually start wrapping it up just because of time. I do think, and that's a very important point, is it's not just a scary law. It's basically, you should be doing this to, you will be doing this. And it's just having, I mean, it's not just, it shows that you have a plan, that you care, that yes, have 25,000 people over for breakfast, but make sure they're safe, make sure there are things in place to ensure that safety. And if God forbid something were to happen, everyone on site knows exactly where they should be, where they need to be, and what to do.
Yep, absolutely. That's the key.
Very cool. Well, thank you again, and I'll thank Barry.
My pleasure. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Nice shirt, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect.
I got to get this back to the store. I just rented it, so for today,
that's
just
fine.
for you.
You can, you owe me $25.
Yeah, I got to get it back by 4 p.m. So
perfect. Well, thank you again.
Hey, I enjoyed this.
Very fun. And thank you again to the Mall Talkers. We'll chat next time. Later.